Hi, and welcome to Talking to Investors, the Impact Startup Negotiations podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Evan Davies, CEO and co founder of Scrapp. We discuss how Evan takes the pressure out of fundraising and sales while closing more deals, the crazy level of commitment you get from people you can laugh with, and how to make that happen, the greatest boost you can give your fundraising without an investor, and why reaching out to investors via lists hardly ever works, and what you should do instead. As always, if you enjoy these interviews, please hit the bell button and subscribe to my channel. All right, let's get rolling. Hi, Evan. Great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
One thing that I found really interesting in hearing about your startup, Scrapp, Evan, you basically founded Scrapp straight out of university, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And maybe we need to say something about the spelling of this startup name, because for the people who are just listening, right, it's spelled Scrap with two P's at the end. And so how did you come up with that name?
That's a great question. So yeah, start off as a university dorm room project, and one of our modules or tasks of the semester was we had a choice. You either write a 5-page report on a green technology we like, or try and solve an environmental or social problem with a chance of winning $30,000. As you can imagine, as three broke university students, it was a pretty easy decision. And we ended up developing a solution to the problem of contaminated recycling. So it's plastic bags in the recycling bin. Mm-hmm. And when I sat down with my co-founders in the really early days, we decided to create a barcode scanning app. We scan the barcode of a product anywhere in the world, and we tell you how to recycle it. Mm-hmm. Because 8 out of 10 of us put our waste in the wrong bin. And we broke down the name Scrap. It was the solid consolidation of recyclates, aluminium, papers, and plastics. Okay. That's actually what it stood for. And then
I like it.
We really, like 3 engineering students, highly over-engineered that name. And then when we actually looked at it, it was like, oh, Scrap and 2 Ps, Scrap and an app. We're building a mobile app, Scrap and an app. So when you see it, the double entendre written down, it makes a lot more sense. But there was a long-winded answer to that question.
No, but I like it. Thank you. And the other thing that really interested me was that you came straight out of uni and you started a company, and then you said to yourselves, how does anybody run a company, and how did you solve that problem of that lack of experience?
Yeah, so yeah, it was quite an awakening. So we ended up just all getting jobs after we graduated. Mm-hmm. So the idea was we get a job in a industry or an area of a field that is similar to what we're doing at Scrap. Mm-hmm. And so myself, I worked for a data company for 6 months, and that really helped me understand, okay, how do data companies operate? What frameworks do they use? How do you market it? How do you sell it? How does the organization function? And that was really instrumental in teaching me the fundamentals of running a business. By no means was it like actually running a business. I just got to see firsthand how people do it. And then there's a lot of practices that we've been able to look at and tweak and mold into how we now operate as a company.
Tell me a bit more about Scrap, please. What do you do? What's your mission?
So our mission is to educate and empower a global community towards a circular future. And the idea is that we're trying to build a digital platform that is ensuring that us as a society can adopt what is called the circular economy. The circular economy, for those that don't know, because the daunting statistic is that 9 out of 10 people don't know. So I'm not going to judge if you didn't, because I had no idea either. But the idea is that we essentially stop this consumption model where we take stuff out of the ground, we make it into things, we use it, and then we just bury it or burn it, or just let it leak into our ecosystems. Mm-hmm. That's what's currently known as the linear economy model. The circular economy model is where we take things out of the ground, we make them, we use them, we then repair them or reuse them, and we essentially extend their life by putting them back into that circular model. So then when we can then make and reuse again and again and again, rather than polluting our planet. And so that's really what Scrap is trying to build going forward. And by doing that, we're engaging many different stakeholders with software, because that allows cross-industry collaboration, which means that we don't just have to look at the individuals, for example, that put stuff in the right bin, like I mentioned earlier, like the putting stuff in the right bin is great. And then you can create all of these mechanisms to get it into the right bin, which are fantastic. But the way I describe it is it's kind of like building a bigger bucket. Why don't you just turn the tap off at the source of the problem? And so we essentially, rather than put the onus on you and I putting stuff in the right bin, we could look further up and say, hey, brands, suppliers, retailers, what waste are you bringing out into the market? And how can we design for correct disposal rather than just throwing out all of this stuff into the world and then somebody else can figure out the problem?
Part of your new development of your software is also starts further upstream. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you do that?
We basically have built a way of being able to track. So you can kind of think of it like, carbon accounting, right? And they essentially look at scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions of all these different types of carbon sources. And that's anything from downstream to upstream. We're essentially doing the same thing, but with waste. You can call us waste accountants if you like. And I think that's a good way of helping to kind of contextualize. Okay, so we can know exactly what's coming into a business and what's leaving a business in terms of the waste footprint. And so every month we can say, hey, you're bringing in 5 tons of single-use plastic this month. And then using data and then knowing where the end life and the end markets are of that material, you can then optimize to go, hey, if we made this and this change with the shape, the material, the coloring, etc., we could increase recyclability or reusability, which means that 5 tons of plastic will actually, you have like 3 tons of it recycled. Well, then maybe if you make these and these tweaks, you could get it up to 5 for 5, and then you've kind of evened out the checks and balances, right? Because then you've secured circularity or zero waste, as we call it.
Okay. And so, do I understand correctly that you also suggest, let's say, alternative products that are less wasteful? I think when we were at COP, what am I talking about? when we were at Change Now, right? You're talking about a sustainable supplier network. Is that right? Or
Correct. Yeah. So one of the ways in which we can use our data, which is helpful in a lot of ways, is we can identify where businesses can improve reducing their waste or their waste reduction strategies. And by having our sustainable supplier network, which we've got some fantastic businesses on at the moment, it means that we can then recommend alternatives to what they currently have, which is causing the problem in the first place, right? And so what I always say, like, we don't necessarily have the solution to the problem that these companies have when it comes to their waste, but we know the people that do. And that was what was really inspiring about being at Change Now, is there were so many sustainable suppliers and solutions providers out there. And I thought, this is fantastic. We can pair them up, because a lot of it's finding needles in haystacks, because it's sustainability is such a broad topic, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. So for example, that going back to that 5 tons of single-use plastic, let's say that we know a supplier that can provide an alternative for those 5 tons of single-use plastic. Instead, it's compostable or biodegradable or something that's more or fiber-based, right? We can then just say, hey, if you switched out this for this, here's the quantified impact over a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year horizon.
And there's an economical component too, right? Because waste management, for large corporations costs money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a study up to 10% of turnover can be on waste management fees in enterprise businesses.
Okay, that's a lot. I was a bit shocked by that number just now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about fundraising. What's your experience with fundraising so far? What stage are you at? How much money have you raised so far for Scrapp?
So we a little bit unorthodox with the route of fundraising. So we started a equity crowdfunding round that was in 2022, and that was kind of like the really early, like testing hypothesis, testing market, etc. And because we were B2C focused at the time, equity crowdfunding made sense. And so we raised $100,000 then in 2022, and then we've now just closed our pre-seed round of $500,000, and that was through angels, so no institutional capital.
What was your impression of the angel investors that you met along the fundraising journey?
One of the things with the angels is they really back the people, and they really want to be part of it with you. And I think that was what stood out the most. They really, yes, of course, it's an investment, but the way the institutional mindset works compared to how the angel mind works, I think is very different. As long as they're making something back on their money, like that, I know they're not necessarily thinking, oh, this company is going to be a unicorn. Obviously, they want it to do well, of course, but
Mm.
They're really just in it to kind of help the people that are building it. And I think
Mm.
that's what's interesting. But potentially I've spoken to other institutional VCs before, and they've said, if you can have angels that are giving you money because they're backing you, that's a very good indicator and a very good it's a green flag that they're willing to back you as a founder,
Mm.
because they know that the business model is going to change. They know that the product's going to change. As long as they can understand you as a person and the vision and where you want to take it
Mm.
and believe in your execution, that's what really matters.
Execution and uh, I heard an investor say, I want to believe in the founder's ability to adapt to changing circumstances.
Yeah, I like that.
Do,
That's
do you think
that's a
that's
good
part
line.
of it? Because I mean, I'm sure you've
Definitely.
pivoted, right?
Oh yeah, we've pivoted. Yeah, I think we're at 3-4 times now. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
but yeah, no,
And
100%.
one of the latest developments is this, what's it called? Sustainable Suppliers Network, right?
Yeah,
And
well,
yep,
I wouldn't say it was a
it's
pivot
more of an addition,
necessarily, but
right?
an addition. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
more of a,
Uh-huh.
yeah, an embracing of something.
Mhm. Of becoming more than just accountants in a way, right? Because now you're empowering people to make decisions that will then have great influences on the accounting, but it's more than just accounting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mm. In fact, on a personal note, this is one of the components that fascinates me most.
yeah.
You know, I totally agree that the accounting component is super important, but the ability to go beyond that and influence corporate decisions is
Mm,
takes it to another level.
yeah, that's
That's
the
my
hope.
personal fascination with it.
Nice, good. No, I like it. Thank you. It's good to know.
Would you say that, you know, with VCs, they've got the limited partners. That means they're getting the money from somewhere. That means they also have conditions that they have to meet. Would you say that angels are more flexible?
I'd say so on the whole. Yeah, pretty flexible. I don't have a lot of experience with institutional VCs, other than the ones that I've spoken with when we went into the market to start fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've spoken. The I would say so. Yeah,
How much of the conversation revolved around economics versus impact?
I think impact is a big decision. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think it's hard without speaking, without actually fully sitting down with one of the investors. But I feel, as much as we would say impact, at the end of the day, if you view something as an investment, right, there's the not expectation, but definitely the hope that it would provide some sort of economic benefit to the person, right? So maybe I don't necessarily think it's going to be the thing that pushes it over the line, but it's definitely going to provide some comfort of like, oh, okay, no, this is for a good cause. This is for something that is hopefully or hopefully going to have some sort of positive environmental or social impact.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as I'd love to say that it's it's the impact that does it, I think the economics at the end of the day do have the winner in that. But I feel like that's how it should be,
Mm-hmm.
because if you can create a very economically viable solution that is environmentally positive at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to be in a very good position as a company.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, you see the reports coming out now of people that say that they would want to buy more sustainably, but if
Mm-hmm.
it's 50% higher than what the cheaper alternative is, they're going to go cheaper every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that kind of scale just translates even into the investing world. It's like, if you can't build an economically viable business, why would I invest in you?
Yeah. And you know, the reason I asked that question wasn't to kind of like,
Mm,
how do you say, the idea is not to say, well, does it really need to be economically viable? Of course, it needs to be economically viable.
mm,
My question is just how much interest is in the values that drive you? Are the investors interested in that? Is that part
mm.
of the conversation? And if yes, how strong?
Everyone who speaks to myself and Mikey, and I'm sure the other team members as well.
Mhm.
Mikey's one of my co-founders. It's very much, and I'm sure Thomas and John as well. We're very passionate, right?
Mhm.
We're young, passionate guys, and I think that I've been told many times that screams through with what we're doing. And And I'm like, really, really, really? Does it? I didn't think so. But I think, and as investors have said that to us, they're like, you clearly see that you personally are so values driven that I feel like when you speak with an investor, they want to get aligned with that. They want to be like, yeah, okay, you're onto something,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a positive mission behind it. Yeah, I'll get behind you. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're quite values driven, I think, in the investment for sure.
One of the things that I hear from founders is it's about finding the really, really good fit. In fact, ideally, a perfect match.
Mm,
So, do you feel like you've got perfect match investors, or just let's
mm.
say good fit at least, right? And how did you find out whether it was a good fit?
Yeah, I think we've got an amazing fit of investors. I know Mikey, my co-founder, he did a fantastic job of heading up a lot of those efforts in the States. And the ones that we had in the early days, they're the ones that found us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really interesting because the ones that found us are still the ones that champion our voice today.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that didn't find us, and we had to go out and find them. Now, our ones do, like, definitely still, like, they support Scrapp and always talk about us. But when you find an investor who's actively seeking you out, I think it just is very interesting because it gives you a lot of confidence in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a couple, one of which is now on our advisor board. He was seeking out solutions in the space and found us. Well, actually, no, he found a similar solution to us, and then we reached out to him, but we'd already heard that he was actively looking and engaging. And
Mm-hmm.
so for us, that level of conviction of a positive relationship was just much higher.
And so his engagement was also not just economically driven, but also values driven, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was looking for something impactful.
All right, now here's the deal. If you want to get real impact investors who are eager to fund you because you are the ideal startup for them, and who can bring you more new clients through their network, and who will give you warm intros to other impact investors, then go to perfectmatchinvestor.com. That's perfectmatchinvestor.com. Enter your email address, click on download, and get my ebook on how to eliminate the noise and find the top 5% of investors that'll supercharge your impact startup. Now, I want to pick up on something that's been kind of in the air and we haven't quite like nailed it, but there's something interesting about your startup, which is that you're two co-founders, or how many co-founders at the very beginning?
So we're three at the beginning.
And you're spread in the UK and in the US, right? You said Mikey is in the US. So how did that happen? How did you become a team of founders that's half in the US and half in the UK, or maybe two-thirds in one country and one-third in the other?
I guess yeah, COVID played a big part in that. So I ended up getting stuck. So I was studying in the US when we had that great decision of the environmental report or the 30 grand prize. So we were in the US studying at the time. COVID happened. My co-founder at the time moved back to the UK. He was British, and then I ended up getting stuck for various reasons in the US, and I stayed in the US for several months after.
Mhm.
I then flew home back to the UK. All the while, we're still working on Scrapp, but entirely remotely. But then we started to get a lot of interest in our solution in the UK because the UK market just seemed more open to it and ready for the type of sustainable solutions that we were offering.
Mhm.
So it was a long back and forth for a while. Excuse me. It was whether we went just US or just UK, or do we just try and split the two? And because it was COVID, stuff had been locked down, and we were software, it just seemed to make sense that we kept our options open.
Mhm.
And so we did. So we've got technically two companies, one in the US, one in the UK. And again, I was fully ready to think, okay, if COVID didn't exist, I'd probably be moving back to the US to get this thing up and running.
Mhm.
But then because we were still getting interest in the UK, I couldn't really leave. We're getting a lot of interest. It just made sense for me to stay. And then Mikey and the rest of the US team to just carry on in the US.
Mhm.
So
And
kind of
so
happened by
Mikey is
accident.
American.
Mikey's American. Yeah, he's based
Uh-huh.
just outside of Boston. And then we've also got two technical directors, Thomas and John, who have
Mhm.
been with us for a long time now. And we've also got a handful of other employees spread across. I think the furthest west that we've got is Chicago, and the furthest east is Abu Dhabi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're starting to spread around the globe.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting because a lot of people think, oh, is that a hindrance having that broad like time zone difference, right?
Hmm.
And I always say to them, well, you can kind of think of it as a competitive advantage because the company hours don't stop. Like they're always going. Like technically, Scrap's running 24/7. Just somebody somewhere is working.
Now, if you look at the investors, the angel investors that decided to fund Scrap,
Mm-hmm.
what are the top three reasons that you believe made them fund you?
I think they knew what we were going through, and by going through, they knew that we weren't. We haven't been dawdling. We've been really working.
Hmm.
And so, because they had that understanding, I think they could see the hard work that we were going into it. They had faith that we'd figure it out and keep
Hmm.
figuring it out. And to your point, adapting as we go, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'd say that was the first one. Second one is knowledge of the industry,
Hmm.
knowledge of the markets. I think that was very helpful for definitely a few of our investors, is they already had background in it. And again, increased their conviction in investing in us because they knew that where the market was going, they could look at other solutions on the market, assess where we sit in that and go, okay, yeah, no, these guys are doing it the right way.
Hmm.
Uh, so there was that, I'd say, for number two. Number three, and I think this is an important one, I think having more of a personal connection. So we had several investors that we knew through immediate networks, or in secondary networks, right? So it was relatively close to home, but I feel like that's a lot how angel investment money works, right? It's you can find in your immediate or like not too far away from your network. It's like, oh, I know a friend who's an angel investor, right?
Hmm.
Who's a friend of the business. So that one, but then also in the same way, like with other investors that we've spoken with, we'd built up a personal connection over time with them. So even though it was the first time that they'd heard of Scrap, the first time they heard of us was when we were building Scrap. It wasn't an instant like, here's money. It was like, here's our info, let's chat, let's stay in touch, build up a bit of a rapport,
Hmm.
and let the relationship go from there. So I'd say those are the three things
Hmm.
for me: personal connection, knowing the market, and just understanding the work that you're putting in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they know you're doing, they know you're sacrificing to do what you're doing.
Hmm. And how do you build rapport?
Like this, just come on podcast. No, no, just chat, like dropping an email saying hi once every couple of months or once every month, whatever stage you're at. I think it's more just having that presence
Hmm.
and chatting, going for a coffee if they live nearby. If they don't, booking a time on your calendar. I think it's one of those things that's easy to say, and then a lot of people maybe overcomplicate it, the idea of building rapport. But I really think it's just like, I'm excited. I help there's other companies that I'm also like kind of helping on the side,
Hmm.
and you just touch them. Well, they touch base with me like once every couple of months. It's like, catch up, how's things going, how'd this go, how'd that go, what's new, and not talk about work all the time. I think that's probably another big one.
Yeah. Is it true that it helps if there's some kind of personal interest?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Having the personal interest definitely helps,
Mm.
from an investor standpoint for sure.
Mm.
But what's amazing is like, if you get on with somebody, you want to help them, and if you can't help them financially, you'll find somebody who they think could help you, right?
Mm.
And so I think it's not, because then I think, I don't know if have you ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's one of the, because you could always say like, oh, is there an ulterior motive to this relationship, right? Like, oh, you're being friendly with me, but because you have some personal gain to get out of it.
Mm.
And I think if you really just don't go into conversations like that, and you just think, okay, I'm here to just get to know you, right? And then what comes of it comes of it. I think because the other thing as well is when you build an expectation into building rapport in a relationship, I think it can then fracture in some ways if it doesn't go the way that you want. And then that defeats the purpose of building rapport.
Yeah. And it can cause impatience too, which is one of the real, how do you say, it's not good for relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you have expectations and you become impatient, and then you try to manipulate the conversation into a certain direction, or you try to push people. And I think this is one of the other things that I've heard is basically, like you said, go in without too many expectations and go in with a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Which also means that it's great to start fundraising when you don't really need money yet.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
What's the best time to start fundraising? I don't know. Yesterday?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter where
No,
you're
no.
at, right? It doesn't really matter where you're at.
No, there's a good old saying, it's you're never not fundraising as a founder. And I think that's true. I mean, on my to-do list of the many to-do lists I have, is to polish off the investment deck. I mean, we only just finished the round, but I'm already now thinking, okay, we're going to be fundraising again. Let's start getting those conversations and try, maybe not diving headfirst into it, but you start doing some of the groundwork. You get your materials ready, you get your conversations and identifying who's you're going to be speaking with and all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't stop.
Did you have a clear process when you started fundraising, or did the process kind of develop as you did it?
Bit of both. So started off, I was doing it myself, and the process was kind of developing as I went. And then I got a fundraising mentor, and that fundraising mentor, who is an investor himself, but has coached a lot of startups around fundraising and commercialization. That was so helpful. And that then, my kind of half-assed guess of what a process should look like was kind of pulled up and then redone. And that was good. So now and then that's been really good for me, because now it's helped me understand, okay, this is how it all hangs together, and then means what I can do for the next one.
So would you say that having a clear process is crucial?
Definitely crucial. Yeah. And I think it's always debated whether, like, you could say the fundraising round is won or lost by the process of the founder. But you can have a really good process, but it's like, I feel like a lot of these things in life, sometimes stuff just happens that wasn't in the playbook, that just has benefited you somehow. Like we've had just bumped into somebody and then chat to them at a conference, and then they're ready to invest on the spot, kind of thing. Ready to, asking who can you write the check to. So it's like, there's no process that can really build for that, right? I'm not saying that it's definitely not a good strategy, but it's just being willing to accept that sometimes the process won't be the thing that gets you the return. It will be something else unique that you would never have guessed. But always having a good process as a fundamental, for me personally, I thought was really important.
And also in those kinds of situations, when you come across somebody who's willing to pull out their checkbook right away, obviously there was something you got right. What would you say are the components that, when you have an opportunity like that, to not let it pass by, but to be able to actually grasp that opportunity and make the most of it? What do you need to be able to do that?
I think I'm going to say it again, but passion. Honestly, the amount of people that have come up to us and said, you can just see the passion in what you're building. And that's so important, because they always say, like, that through the hard times you'll get through it because you have this why and purpose in what you're doing. And in those moments when they're looking at you and hearing your story and about what we're doing, they're like, oh yeah, like, I want to see you succeed, but based on the passion that you've shown. I wish I had a great like playbook on that specific thing, but it's funny that you've brought it up, because it really is like, I've had like 4 different investors just say to me, like, oh yeah, the passion's so clear in you guys. Just one last week. I was like,
oh, okay.
And like, of course, there's that's a double-edged sword, right? Because then if you want to build credibility, just because you're passionate doesn't mean that you're on the right track. But I guess if you're looking at from people to person to person, if you know that somebody's passionate about something, they can see that you're willing to go above and beyond to make this thing work. They're probably going to put the money on that horse rather than somebody who's maybe it's not their core focus of their time, or they're not really focused on that specific thing. They know they've got another step that they want to get to. This is just more of a stepping stone to get to where they want to get.
Where does the passion come from?
No, good question. Yeah, talking all about passion now, where does mine come from? I think the passion for me just comes from the looking around of the world and seeing the state of stuff on Twitter, or now X. There's a lot of stuff that I follow where I'm like, oh wow, okay, like we could be in a very bad situation in the next 50 years. And I come from my grandfather was an entrepreneur, ironically in bio waste removal. And so I knew that in me personally, that entrepreneurship is something that's in my family. So maybe that was something for me. I was like, well, there's a big problem and I've got it in my blood, so that would make sense for me to pursue it, right? But I think my passion actually truly came from the idea that I started we started Scrapp in its early days, and then we started to uncover more and more of the problem. And then you realize, oh, this is like a never ending thing that you're kind of uncovering. And I think that just becomes quite addictive, and that you kind of passion comes from that, because you realize, oh, like this is a monumental problem, which requires monumental effort. And I don't know why, that just seems to be something that's pretty fun somehow.
Pretty fun is a very, I would almost dare say it's a bit of a British understatement. Let's go change the world. It could be fun.
It could be, yeah. It could be. Yeah.
And we're back. You might see that we're looking slightly different. We had a little internet breakdown actually, but now we're back on course and we're going to wrap up the last 20 minutes of our conversation. What do you think that was, Evan?
It was the British weather. We had a big storm that came in, and then it ended up knocking down the Wi-Fi for the day. So yeah, it really made me realize that I rely too much on the internet for my day-to-day.
Do you think the effects of heavy weather on Wi-Fi users is going to be heavy in the future too?
Oh yeah. I think the input, yes, climate change is going to do some damage on that, and I think that will make it really hit home. I think, especially in countries in the Western world, like when you start realizing you can't access social media because the extreme weather has taken down your Wi-Fi. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Especially for the younger generation, when it starts hitting the mobile phones and TikTok and stuff, we're going to get some real raised awareness going on, right?
Oh yeah, big time. Big time.
No more 8 hours of watching 15-second clips.
No. How will they live?
So we just had quite a funny moment at the end of our previous session. Yeah, this is the only interview so far that I've done kind of in two separate sessions. But at the end of the first session, that seems like 2 minutes ago for everybody who's listening, right? We were talking about how, what was it? What did you say? You said it felt like it could be pretty fun to, change the world, or maybe even save the world. Could be pretty fun.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I stand by
it. Good. Yeah. And I think that's also part of the, very important kind of slightly lighter-hearted attitude towards starting something new, starting something, I think you called it monumental. Which is important to find that balance, right? Between the responsibility and also possibly a sense of urgency, but also that it's actually fun to be doing it. How do you keep that going for yourself, that it just, you keep it light?
Yeah, within the company, we have a laugh, and we turn up every day, we work hard, but we can still have a joke and have a laugh. And I think that's not taking it too seriously, I think, has been a really key in that. I think it's more of a mindset for us. It's like, yeah, we're here, we're trying to make a good positive impact. It's a lot of work. It's a typical startup, right? You get these pushbacks and the ups and the downs of the roller coaster. But I think it was a tweet that I saw a year or two ago, and it was like, the startups that can build something impactful but have fun while they're doing it are the ones that will last. And I think I really tried to bake that into the culture, and the team do a fantastic job as well of it's just having some fun with it. It's while you've got, of course, there's like you can think of the broader context of the problem that we're solving and the very serious consequences of it.
Hmm.
Because you're still such a small part of that puzzle, it means you just you can't get overwhelmed by it all, because then you lead to complete fear and anxiety. And sometimes that's a great driver, but sometimes it can really just put you down and put you off.
Yeah, and that's not what makes you want to get up every morning, right?
Exactly.
Whereas if you're going into an office space, or whether it is for some startup founders a shared workspace, and the people who you see there, they're going to be positive minded. We're going to share some, even if it's black humor, even if it's some dark joke, but just that, right? A little bit of a good vibe is super important, I think, too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually funny because we started off as a remote organization, 100% remote,
Hmm.
and building a company culture around that was very difficult when you're just using Teams channels, right?
Hmm.
And it was actually one of our engineers last year who joined the team. He introduced us to this thing called GatherTown,
Hmm.
and it's a virtual office. And in the virtual office, you have your own little desk, and you can walk over to everyone and chat. And so it's like a Pokemon game, but for an
Okay.
office. And it completely changed the way in which we have fun, because you can design the office the way you want, you can customize your own desks. And it was just something that for a remote team that we found really difficult, is how we overcame to keep it fun, keep it entertaining. You can play games with each other. There's loads of different these little things that, despite the fact we're based over 8 different time zones, it still feels like you're together in one team.
Hmm. That's amazing. That's really amazing to have that level of social togetherness built out by basically another kind of online feature, that
Yeah.
many people probably don't consider. Some people might even think it's a waste of time, but I agree with you. It is actually one of the core components of building a company culture, is to have those times together when it's not just about getting tasks done.
Yeah, exactly.
Jumping back to our conversations about your interactions with investors,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is the greatest added value that an investor has brought into your company?
So there's a few that I can think of, and it's all been in the marketing realm. It's all been using their platforms. They've built established platforms in the packaging industry and become influential voices, and having them pushing Scrapp, promoting Scrapp, understanding that we have something to offer and that they're backing it, not just financially, but with their own audiences as well,
Mhm.
and promoting it to them on their platform. That's been the biggest value add. So I'd say marketing and getting the name out there. I think for startups, that's usually a big challenge. It's you've got limited resources. How can you find ways of tapping into larger markets, and by doing and finding vehicles in which you can do that, and by getting a value add investor who has that platform, is a great way of doing it. In the same way that if you were looking for, now that's worked for us, it might not be the same for everybody, but you could find a value added investor who has several customers who would be your ideal customers as well, just in a slightly different segment.
Mhm.
And working with them means you can, if they help their customers win, it helps them win, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But for us specifically, it's been more in marketing and getting our name out there.
So looking for those kinds of synergies.
Yeah, also I love that word, all synergies.
How did you discover those investors that bring you those kinds of synergies?
They see what we're doing and they reach out to us. And those are the ones, because they're already looking for the synergies, right? So they've already got an eye for it. Other ways in which we found ones that didn't necessarily find us and we discovered them was by being proactive in understanding where the company wants to go and how we can find the right people at different stages of the journey to join us. And so it required us to sit down and go, okay, we know that we want to get from A to B by doing what we're going to do. Are there nodes along the way that we can tap into that could help get us there quicker? So, for example, when we launched our sustainable supplier network, for example, it was like, okay, who do we know that has an understanding of the market of packaging? And then it was like, okay, this person, what does this person do? What do they offer? And then you can essentially, you kind of have to be proactive in how you discover them and think about how does that kind of fit into your overarching goal. And that was really how we did it. It was looking at the current market, understanding, okay, we want to get from here to here. identifying who we can talk to on the way in different areas too, because sometimes they come out of nowhere. Like HR companies, for example, who are that we've started working with, who are actively looking for sustainable solutions in the office to improve employee health and well-being. And so it's like,
I like that little twist. What was that? Wealth and well-being? It says
wealth
something.
and well-being.
Is there a little bit of an anti-capitalist sentiment in there?
Yeah.
I like it. Wealth and well-being, and we're gonna have to keep that. Which one would you choose? Health and well-being or wealth and well-being? Something deep hidden underneath that, but anyway, we won't go there. If you're looking at these kinds of, people or companies that you can align with, where you might have corporate partnerships or strategic investors that are able to help you with marketing, what was the greatest positive surprise that you experienced from one of these kinds of partners or investors?
One of the biggest surprises is we got a nomination for a very prestigious award recently through them. And that is something that they didn't have to do it. No one asked them to. We didn't ask them to, but they just saw enough value in us and what we're doing that they felt like they could and they would, and they did. And it was great. And so I think that was the biggest surprise for me personally.
And what is the nomination for?
It's called the Earthshot Prize.
A few months ago, I spoke to an investor who had invested into a startup that won the Earthshot Prize.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
So we're going to have to stay in touch about this, because I think the Earthshot Prize is an amazing prize. Hope you win it. Right now, it's still a nomination, right?
Still just nomination at the moment, but yeah.
And it comes with a fair amount of press too, so obviously that's good, right?
Yep. Yeah. Speaking of, yeah, absolutely.
Great. Congratulations. That's a really positive surprise from an investor to, help you out in that way or to see you in that way.
Yeah. Oh, it's very I'm very blessed to be able to have people that support us and the mission and what we're doing to such an extent that they'd be willing to nominate for something like that.
So when you think about our listeners who are usually founders at the early stages of their startup, a lot of them have maybe raised one round or maybe not raised any rounds yet. What would you say? What would your key advice to them be? What should they pay attention to when they start thinking about fundraising?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question. I think understanding if your business is suitable for raising institutional money, first and foremost. Not every business is, and there are plenty of Y Combinator videos out there who have explicitly said, like, look, the VC model is not for 99% of startups. I think if you understand, and Scrapp, I believe we're one of them. I think at the moment, anyway, we know that where we can go with it, institutional money will potentially be an option for us. But right now, the growth in which we've gone as a business hasn't been through institutional capital. It's been through what I'd call smart money, when it's the value-add investors that have been able to support us in ways outside of the financial, as you've mentioned. So I think understanding if you are institutional money, first and foremost, is the most important, and being really ruthless with that. Like, grants are great non-dilutive capital that you can tap into. It's a long process. There are nuances to that. But the advice I got really early on was the best form of fundraising is through customers. And that's an interesting one, because it's not like, again, if you're a deep tech company with very high initial investment costs in the millions that you just could never get a customer towards, then a VC model or institutional model is probably better suited for you. But my advice for anyone who's thinking about that fundraising journey is know what your business should be doing when it comes to fundraising first and foremost. And like, sometimes it's one of those where you have to get the early customers first, you start proving the traction and the revenue, and then it's like, okay, we know that if we can do this and this and these markets and grow in this way with institutional money behind us, we can become that $100 million, $1 billion company. But for a lot of companies, that's not the case. So it's just being brutally honest with, like, okay, is this the right route for us or not?
What about the process of fundraising?
The process is really, really important for the relationship building. And that's really what it is, right? It's like I had an investor CRM, still do, that it just keeps everyone that I've been speaking with in my mind when I'm going around the fundraising conversations. That is how you build those relationships going forward, because you'll see on LinkedIn or other areas, there are these great databases of investors, and there's hundreds and hundreds of these lists that are out there with thousands of people on them. But reaching out to them cold seldom works, and it's always through warm introductions. And to get warm introductions, you have to build the relationships of your network, and then from there you can always find introductions somewhere of somebody going, oh, you're raising money, I know somebody who I can introduce you to. And that social proof is really, really good. And that was a great one for us, especially when we were going through the angel networks, was to find that social proof. And everyone always says like, oh yeah, you can only raise money through warm introductions, and no one really tells you how. And I think the how is the bit that a lot of people get stuck on, and that's what I got stuck on really early on, until I got a mentor and they taught me, okay, you don't just go to somebody with your hand out asking them for money. You work with them in telling them about your business you're working on, showcasing the solution and how it's working. The good old saying, don't ask for money, you ask for advice and you'll get money. You ask for money and you'll get advice. That classic.
Yeah.
That same sort of principle, right? And not that I'm saying you should even go with your hands out asking for advice, expecting money by any means. It's just you can start forming some sort of relationship, and then people can understand how you work and how you operate. And then we'll go from there basically. And that takes months. That's something that if you were thinking, to the question you made earlier, if you're thinking about it and you know it's the right strategy, but you're not there yet, like you're going to raise money eventually, start building out the relationships, understanding, okay, who's investing in the space, start going to these events. Don't let it take up all your time, but enough that you can keep a finger on the pulse. So you're not stressing in the 11th hour trying to find all these investors that are probably not going to invest in you because you're coming in cold and haven't given that time in the first place.
Yeah. So would you say that for yourself, events were a key aspect of building these warm relationships?
Yeah, events have been fantastic. That like, as much like we're 100% remote organization, but I always say nothing beats in person. I love in-person stuff. I mean, we met in person at an event, and I feel like you can really build a rapport with somebody much quicker in person. And those events usually, sometimes you're going around a room and it feels like wasted exercise, because maybe you're not finding the right person, or you just feel like, oh, I should really be focused on my company. And I know that it's a hotly debated topic, but the way that we found success is when you're at an event, usually it's bringing like-minded people or people that are in the industry looking for a specific thing. And if they don't know, but you get talking with them, they can introduce you to somebody who might. And I think it's just increasing those touch points, especially in the early stages, is a really good way to help support that journey for you.
Speaking of which, we also met at an event, right? We met at Change Now. So I think it holds true, right? Once you've got that personal connection, it's so different rather than if the first time you meet is online.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe even just via an email or a direct message on LinkedIn or things like that. Then it takes longer to warm it up, right?
Exactly.
Evan, I want to thank you for joining me today, and actually 2 days ago as well.
No, thank you. Thank you for your patience with me. I appreciate it.
And it's been a real pleasure. And thank you also for all the insights that you brought into this interview for the listeners.
No worries. I hope people can derive some sort of value from it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss an episode. And please do share this podcast with any impact founders you know who might benefit from better understanding the investor mindset and from thinking about what that really means: impact. Let's start this discussion between startup founders and investors about impact in the spaces of circularity, sustainability, and regeneration. Thank you. Bye.